Hello students, and welcome back to another lovely day of physical science. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about observations versus interpretations in science, and we're going to talk about what the difference is between them and more specifically, why we use them. So let's go ahead and get started. So the learning outcome for today is I will be able to distinguish between observations and interpretations. That is, if I give you some examples, you'll be able to tell me. Was that an example observation or was it an interpretation? So when you are making observations, an observation is really anything that you take in through your five senses. If you don't remember what those are or haven't learned about them, we'll talk about those coming up here. But really an observation is something that will not vary from person to person. That is, it is universally true no matter who you are. So your five senses now are sight, touch, smell, hearing, and taste. If you need extra time to write these down, just pause the video. So there are two different types of observations. One observation is what we call qualitative. That is, statements containing word descriptions. So if I was doing some sort of lab, like let's say we're working with pennies, I might say the penny is copper colored. The penny is round. The penny feels smooth. Those are qualitative observations about a penny. So they're the penny's qualities. The penny is copper colored. The penny is round. So they're qualities. Then there are what's called quantitative. That is, they contain numbers. So think of like a quantity. And in science, quantitative tends to be more meaningful than qualitative. Just because, it tends to be more accurate and true from person to person. I mean, it's an observation, so it's still true, but quantitative is more useful. So if I'm doing a lab, I would want to say I have 20 pennies. Or, I could say I need 50 grams of salt or 100 milliliters of water. So quantitative is just anything that contains a number, hence a quantity. Qualitative is anything that contains word descriptions like a quality. And when something is repeated or an observation is repeated over and over and over, it basically becomes a fact. There's no like set number for it, but eventually we're just like, yeah, okay, that's true. So now what is an interpretation? An interpretation is a statement that contains opinion or bias. That is, it varies from one person to the next. And it's because, we're all human. We all have our own perspective on stuff. So anything that contains our opinion or bias is going to be an interpretation because that's how I'm interpreting it. A good example of this, if I said the Vikings are a good football team, well, that might be true for me. I think they're a good football team, but I can guarantee you there are people that don't. So therefore, that is my interpretation, but your interpretation might disagree. So let's go through a scientific example. So a student dissolved 30 grams of Epsom salt into water, then poured the solution into a dish and let the dish sit out uncovered overnight. The next day, she made the following observations of the Epsom salt crystals that ended up growing in the dish. So we're going to take some observations and interpretations about this. First, let's do some qualitative, that is word description observations. Crystals are clear. Okay, there we go. We're using our sense of color. We are saying these are clear. Crystals are long, thin, and rectangular. Well, again, long and thin are descriptive words. And then we could say white crust is formed around the edge of the dish. Again, these are all qualities of the experiment. Then we have quantitative observations. So quantitative observations would be things like this. That is, we need quantities. So if I said the mass is 30 grams, I have a number, I have a quantity. So that is quantitative. If I said the average or the mean crystal length is 0.5 centimeters, again, I have a number, so it's quantitative. If I said the longest crystal length is 2 centimeters, that's more quantitative data. It's a number. Again, quantitative in science tends to be more useful. So what I would like you to do now is please pause the video and try and solve these on your own. All right, now that you have had a chance to try these, let's actually go through and discuss them. So the mass of the crystal is 30 grams. Well, right away we see that this number is in here. So I'm going to assume that one, it is an observation, but more specifically, it is going to be a quantitative observation because it has a quantity, it has a number value. All right, number two, the student believes the crystals aren't getting larger, but that she is just getting smaller. Okay, that one's an interpretation because it's probably not true. Most people are probably going to disagree with her, but again, it's her interpretation. That's her opinion. So that is going to be an interpretation. China is far away. This is the one that usually gets students, but in this case, this is going to be an interpretation. Because for us, we might consider China to be far away. If somebody's in China, they're probably not going to think China is far away. Or you could even do this as a comparison. For us, China might seem far away now, but what if we compare China to Pluto? Suddenly, China seems pretty close. So again, this is an interpretation. It's going to vary from person to person. I might think China's far away, some people might not. And the last one, the crystals are white and dissolved in water. Well, that's going to be an observation. That's going to be true for everyone. The crystals are going to be white, and they're going to be dissolved in water. You can't really argue with that. So that is a qualitative observation because these are quality descriptors. And there you go. You have just learned about observation versus interpretation.